Hi guys, welcome again to the Perthshire War Room. We're joined by some doves and other birds tweeting around. Such a beautiful day. I thought I'd introduce this evening's war game updates by coming outside into the beautiful Perthshire sunshine. Tonight we're going to look at a review of the rules that I use, the rapid fire World War II fast play rules. The first iteration I saw of these many years ago now looked like this. You can see it there. And the point about these rules was they were really bringing together all the stuff I liked about Wargame World War II. The scale, 20mm, the organisational sizes, you could play brigade-sized actions, really decent-sized actions, and it meant that you could get together some really good chunky-sized units either side of the table. Now the rules lasted for quite a while. They were very popular with all of us. There was lots of articles in the early Wargames magazines about them. So these rules are really beautifully illustrated as always, as you can see. And still to this day contain scenarios that were great fun, including, I might add, this one, Hondheim, which you'll find in the very latest Blitzkrieg Battle Games update that you can get as a booklet from the Rapid Fire Fast Play Wargames website. So that was the first set of rapid fire rules we used. And then the mega set came out, this set. Now you'll see a lot of people on the Facebook page is referring to RF2, and what they mean by that is Rapid Fire, the second edition. That's this edition. This really simplified the playing procedures, made the games much faster to get through, and introduced some new systems of play. And again, they contain lots of fabulous illustrations, beautiful buildings, many of them from Tony Chapman rather at Ravensthorpe Century Models, and the rules, as always, by Colin Rumford and Richard Marsh, featuring a lot of their own kit. But what I'd like to focus on tonight when I go into the Perthshire War Room here tonight when it's dark is the difference between RF2, the Rapid Fire 2nd edition, and these guys, the Rapid Fire Reloaded set. Now I've only played one game with these today because I've been waiting for an update which has been promised and is just about to be delivered, which will allow these rules to take on the kind of actions I like: amphibious, paratroops, assaults and fortifications, all that sort of stuff, because there's a new supplement to these rules coming out which will give you a chance to get to grips with those bigger games that I like. The big difference between these rules and the rules that many of us are more familiar with is that these rules have got a much more simplified anti-tank structure based on a dice roll, and it's number classes for armour rather than letters, so it's much faster to do that resolution on the table. And the infantry fight and take casualties as multiple bases, so if you've got, for example, a crude piece of anti-tank kit like a gun or something like that, it's much more difficult to get that removed from the table than it was under RF2. So those are the broad differences between the rules, but when we get inside later we'll go through them all in detail, and I hope you're enjoying the Perthshire countryside. I'll speak to you all once again. Okay, hi everyone, we're back in the war room now, and not at night the next day, I'm afraid, and not a good day if I look outside the window, a bit of rain. But we're going to have a good look now at the Rapid Fire Reloaded rulebook as we discussed outside. I thought I'd start by going through the playing sequence and talking about some of the simplifications that have taken place in these rules, including, I think, a much better use of plain English rather than the kind of technical terms that we can get hung up on in wargaming. So, and as an example, there's a very nice setup right at the start which shows you a couple of model forces. So there's a sort of standard British force, you've got a battalion of infantry, you've got armour support and artillery support, and then it's kind of equivalent, a German regiment there, set up again with armour support and some other support weapons. So those are two nice forces to get started with, and on the back of the little guide you'll see a map for a scenario and a nice little run through on that scenario so that you can play a game right from the get-go with these rules. So I think my overall sort of view of these rules is that they're a great starter set, as well as a good set for those of us who like rapid fire. They're a really good starter set. They use plain English, they simplify the gaming systems, and they provide you with model force structures and a model battle scenario to get you going. So really good introduction, and really good for those of us already using the rules as they've been used in the past. So in terms of the sequencing, so instead of using the more technical wargaming terms like, for example, morale, the first section is will they fight? And that section really determines whether or not the troops you've got are actually going to take part in the battle at that stage that you're at. So takes into account factors like have they been fired upon, are there friendly people nearby, that sort of stuff. In terms of actual world warfare, are they going to put their heads over the parapet and have a crack at the opposition? And then again, the second part of the sequence isn't called observation, it's called can you see the enemy? And then there's rules on that for who you could automatically see and who you need to test for in order to see. So you roll the dice to find out if you can see people behind hedges or in buildings or wherever they might be. And that's soft cover and hard cover, and talked about woods as well. The next section goes on to moving the troops, and you get the standard distances for infantry, vehicles, etc. going ahead on the road or cross country, and different penalties for crossing obstacles, etc. And then you get to the firing at the enemy section, and again very brief, but very straightforward, very simple. And then I suppose the biggest change is in the anti-tank firing, where in the older RF volumes that we've used, the previous two, there's been a focus on armour class judged by letters, and the gun judged by numbers. Now, the armour class meant you had to cross-reference tables, whereas now everything is numerical. The armour class, or it's referred to in these rules, the target class and the gun class are both numerical. So you've got additions and subtractions to make on your dice as usual, and that means you can resolve the shooting without worrying about going across complicated tables, which again I think is a real step forward. And there's some bits and pieces at the end on smoke, close assault, that sort of thing. There is a sister volume to this just published, which is Rapid Fire Reloaded Extra, which includes the more interesting stuff that I'll get involved in, amphibious, paratroops, all that sort of thing. And the other thing you need to be aware of is on the Rapid Fire Wargames website, there's a lot of free downloads available, which will give you support on the vehicle and gun classifications for different armies during the war, and will give you support on scenarios. And there's also PDFs you can pay to download, there's books that you can send away for. So we spoke in a previous video about the Market Garden Guide, you can buy that on that website, and you can buy both structured forces like the Normandy battle groups and the Blitzkrieg battle groups, and you can buy scenarios to use those forces in, like the Normandy battle games and the Blitzkrieg battle games. The Blitzkrieg battle games, something I'm going to look at next, covers the battles of May 1940. But I think we'll head to the table now and we'll just look at some of these rules in detail as they apply to the wargame in progress. Okay, so here we are back at the Wargames table. We're on the left flank of the Operation Mitten game, so the chateau's in that direction. We've got two companies of British troops here, another one following behind, and then we've got a couple of companies of German infantry there with the vehicles that they arrived in, and a support vehicle here. So the aim of the British is to try and sweep round behind the chateau to take this flank. And things have been going well for them on the other side. They've made a breakthrough by destroying a Panzer IV, chasing some infantry away from the farmhouse, and they're making their way down the road in the distance. So the plan now is for these British to try and assault the troops here. Pretty tough call, and may not go well for them, but that's the plan. And in fact, in real life, there were 3 attacks on Chateau de Lalande in 1944 before they were finally successful. So we're going to play that out and using the sequences in the rules here. So we've got the rules set up ready for us to get going with these, and we'll take it. Okay, so we're ready to see now if our guys will go over this hedge here and make their way. They can't see those infantry there, so the first thing they're going to do is determine whether or not they need to test, and will they need to test to see if they can fight. And at the moment they don't need a test because they've not met any of the conditions that they would have done had they needed to take a test. So just looking at the rules, for example, they haven't suffered any casualties, so they couldn't have reached 50% casualties, for example, from a 48 battalion. They haven't lost 24 or more. They've not already taken a morale test with 1 or more casualties, and it's not an AFV damage by fire, so they don't need to take their will they fight test. So the next thing they need to do is, can they see the enemy? So just to focus on that, as I said earlier, they can't see the opposition troops, and that's because although they're in contact with the hedge and they can see out of the hedge, the guys they're trying to see are more than 12 inches away, and that's the maximum range to see somebody in soft cover, and the same will apply vice versa for those guys, unless something else. Okay, so now that we know that they can't see the enemy, and so far the enemy can't see them, and they haven't had to take a will they fight test, they now take their movement. They could move 6 inches in countryside as opposed to 9 inches in the road, but they've got this linear obstacle in the way, the hedge. So they roll a d6 to determine the score to take off their 6 inches. We just roll that there, they've scored a 1, so they take the 1 off their 6 inches and they can move 5 inches, which is to there. So we'll move these guys there 5 inches across there. Now, the reason I'm doing this, and I wouldn't necessarily do this in a battle against an opponent, is something odd has happened, which is that although they've come from soft cover and they're heading for soft cover and a bit of hard cover there, the guys looking at them from here can see them in open countryside. And even if they'd made it to the hedge, they would still have seen them in open countryside, which means that they can interrupt that move to take a fire at them, known as ambush firing. Now that won't actually be necessary this time because they've not ended up in the soft cover, but if they had ended up in soft cover, we'd have been able to undertake the ambush firing rule at that point, which meant they could have fired to interrupt that move because they could see them as they crossed their line of sight, which I think is pretty straightforward. So the answer to the question, can they see the enemy, is yes, of course they can. They could see up to 4 feet away for open countryside, and they've seen these guys much less than that. So they can definitely see the enemy, so the next thing they're going to do is shoot at them. Okay, so back at the firing for the table, bit of comedy there, a bit of firing I had done and stored in the memory card, didn't store in the memory card, so we're just reshooting this a little bit to keep the continuity going for everybody. So we've got a firing group here of 8 figures, so that's 4 2-figure bases. So that means you use 4 d6s for these guys. They're medium range, so they're beyond 6 but less than 14. And as I say, they've seen them coming through that way, etc. So they've identified them. So now it's time to resolve the firing. So we roll the dice. We've got 2 6s, 3 and a 1. They score on 4, 5 and 6. So that's a whole two casualties. So a 2-figure base is removed, and that's the difference between these rules and the old rules. You remove the base immediately, and if there had been an odd casualty, if it had been 3 casualties, we wouldn't have removed another 2-figure base or put a marker on it. We'd wait and they would try again next move, but they'd have been rounded back down to 0, so it'd been starting again, which is again what affects crew based support weapons, etc. You have to kill the whole crew to get that team removed in one firing round. So that's the firing resolved there. Very simple mechanism, very user friendly, and as I said, in a normal game I wouldn't have done this because that's pretty crazy. You'd have worked your way around the edge and tried to stay in cover for as long as possible, but we wanted to try and just do a little bit of firing just to tie up this little brief guide to introducing the rapid fire reloaded rules. So there we go, the briefest of introductions, and we'll look at more aspects of the rules as we go ahead in the coming months and really start to get into Rapid Fire Reloaded. And now that the Rapid Fire Reloaded extra booklet is out, which covers more complicated actions, we'll include that as well. But I really commend this set of rules to a lot of people. I think it's a great starting set, as I've said, and a really good simple way of getting through a complicated game, a big game, very quickly. This game is on a table that's 12 feet by 6 feet. It's Operation Mitten from the Normandy Battle Games guide, which is scenarios for the Normandy campaign that you can get from the Rapid Fire Wargames site. And as I said right on the start when sitting out there on the deck, look at the difference in these volumes. You're still going to get as playable a game and as enjoyable a game, but you're going to spend much less time going through the rules and a lot more time enjoying the game. So if you want to bring people along to your club night or to your home game and get them involved in this rule set that they've not used before, they're going to get to grips with this really quickly, and that is an absolute bonus. That's really great news. Reminds me of the early rules that people like Donald Featherson used to publish in their books. And I think that's what's really good about these rules. They're straightforward, they're simple, and they're good fun to play. So, as I say, I hope you enjoyed the little guide there. We'll continue to do some more, and if you're introducing people who are new to the hobby and they want to do World War II wargaming, I think you'd struggle to find a better little set of rules than these. I'm really thrilled with them.